Welcome to the Battle Line Podcast. That's a place where we have conversations on that collision of space between community, faith, and culture. I'm one of your hosts, Matt Satterley, and here with me today is the Director of Publications, my co-host on this podcast, my co-host in life, Major Jamie Satterley. How are you doing today, Jamie?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. Today is awesome. We also have with us here our co-host, our producer, our media and marketing manager, or also known as the other one who makes this entire thing run with microphones and headphones and rock team calls, Elizabeth. Elizabeth, how are you doing today?
I am just so super stoked to be here.
Listen,
Matt, you called her the other one.
Did I?
Yes, you said the other one.
The other one that makes this whole thing work, Elizabeth.
Today, we're so excited. We have the privilege of speaking with our national leaders, Commissioners Kenneth and Jolene Hodder. Now, the Hodders have been national leaders here in the United States for almost 3 years now. And so we are definitely excited to hear from them today about leadership and about kind of their experience leading the United States. So we're going to jump right into that. How are you doing today, Commissioners?
We're doing great. Thank you, Major Jamie.
It's wonderful to be here today. I have to say, though, at the outset, I have never heard a more enthusiastic start to a podcast than we just heard from Matt. I feel like I should have another cup of coffee before we do this podcast.
Hey, sir, just try to be loud. You can say anything you want if you say it confident and loud.
Protect the vibe.
We do have to say that it took us to episode 47 to get our national leaders on the podcast. We wanted to make sure that this podcast was sustaining before we,
and we will be discussing that later after the podcast, Major.
All right, so commissioners. First question. A lot of our listeners out there may know of you, have seen you in the war cry and seen you on social media and all that. But first off, tell us a little bit about yourselves. Tell us a little bit about your officership. Just tell us the Hodder story. Where are some of the places you've served? Just introduce yourselves to our listeners, please.
Well, the most important thing about me is that I love Jesus and I love serving him. And I start my morning every single morning with coffee and Jesus. And I end my day every night, no matter where I am in the world, with pillow and praise. And while I have degrees, several degrees, the most important thing about me is that my important credentials is that I'm a loyal disciple of Jesus Christ. I love what I do. I love being an officer. And God has been so good to me through the years.
Yes, indeed. And I would have to echo that. I consider myself to be the most blessed of men. To have the opportunity to serve the Lord every day, to be doing it for all of these years that we've been officers, 35 years this year we will have been serving as officers. If the Army would allow us to start all over again and do it all again, we would, because we can think of no better life than getting up each day to serve God. So we both come from Salvation Army backgrounds. We both come from Salvation Army families, though neither of us ever anticipated that we would be Salvation Army officers. You know, I think there are probably a few people out there in the audience who could echo that. I was practicing law for several years before finally saying yes to the Lord.
Yep, and I was in retail and enjoying the good corporate life when the Lord called us and changed all of that.
Yeah, but you look back on it and you say, the Lord's plan is better than anything we could have come up with. He had a far, far grander and far more exciting plan than we ever imagined for ourselves. So we are just feeling delighted to be here at National Headquarters, delighted to have an opportunity to influence the direction of the Salvation Army's work in this country, and of course, delighted to be here with you folks today.
And when it comes to our appointments, we've served all over the United States. We've served in the West and we've served in the South. We're on missionary service for 11 years and 8 years,
yeah, 8
in
years
Kenya,
in Kenya and 3 years in London. And national headquarters. It's been a wild ride, and we would do it all over again.
Can you share with us a little bit about that call? You mentioned that you had no plans to be Salvation Army officers, which resonates with me. I also had no plan, and yet here we are talking together on this podcast. So can you tell us a little bit about how that happened, how the Lord spoke to you, and how you were able to respond? And then share just a little bit about kind of how that call has continued on as you've served really all around the world.
Sure. Well, we're both involved in the corporate world in Los Angeles. My husband was an attorney for Carter Hawley Hale and absolutely loving it. That's something that he felt he wanted to do ever since he was a young boy, is be a lawyer.
Yes.
And I was into retail and doing well, very excited about promotions coming around the corner. Doing some buying for a large corporate firm. And then it happened one day. Well, you tell them about what happened to you.
Sure. Well, I was invited into the senior partner's office, and he was a very gracious man, a very kind man, and an outstanding attorney. And he said some very nice things about the work that I was doing at the firm. And then, as was the tradition, he presented me with a very generous bonus check. I returned to my office feeling pretty good about what I was doing. And I got to my office and I looked inside and I saw all of the papers that represented the sum total of the transactions that I was doing at that point. And I, in a moment, thought that just isn't enough. It's not enough to spend my life knowing what I know about the needs of people and the way the Lord leads, simply doing deals for different clients. So I got on my knees and I asked the Lord what he intended. And at that moment, I felt that he wanted to leave. He wanted me to leave and become an officer. So I was very excited about it, thrilled, looking forward to the opportunity. But then I went home and I shared it with my wife, and she had a somewhat different response.
I was angry. I said, there's no way that I was going to give up my career. Great things were happening. And, I thought my husband was going to give me the good life, right? Being a corporate attorney. And I told him never, ever to mention it again. It was off the table.
So I kept the promise. I said, all right, darling, I won't. But I was perhaps a bit unfairly committed to a life of prayer. And so I prayed earnestly, Lord, I said, I can't be an officer unless you call my wife. So 2 weeks later, we're on our way to work.
Well, he makes it sound like it was easy 2 weeks. It was a lot of fighting with the Lord. It was a lot of negotiating with him. And he did something very unique that you probably wouldn't hear another woman officer tell you. But the Lord said to me, okay, my calling for you is to support your husband. And I went, what? I'm a career woman. You want me to go because I'm supposed to support my husband? And that was my calling at that time. Since then, I see why he did that. It has strengthened our marriage, but at the same time, I have grown into my calling. And I find that God is so incredibly gracious, and there have been so many callings in my life that I've been able to say yes to because of that original calling. And I'm so glad I said yes.
Oh, yes. And of course, once we made that decision to become Salvation Army officers, everything changed. From that point forward, it didn't matter where we were going to live. It didn't matter what we were going to do. There's a sense of abandonment in following the Lord that we have found so freeing over the years. Whatever the situation, whatever the surroundings, it's always been a joy. It's not been easy, but it's always been a joy. Because we are abandoned to God's will. And that's really what makes the difference.
And I think one of my favorite things I think about the way that God just works in the lives of people is that while it may have seemed like a change of plans or a pivot for you, this is all part, like all of this equipping and all of these things that you were doing before was all part of God's plan, right? And so I'm certain that you have been able to put those skills that you learned prior to officership to use in your officership.
Oh, absolutely. I know my wife has seen that many, many times, particularly when she goes to thrift stores. She thinks, she can really turn these thrift stores around. For me, everything came together in our second appointment when I went to court to speak on behalf of a young woman who was terribly addicted to drugs and who had been accused of a crime, and to stand up in court and in my Salvation Army uniform to speak on her behalf. It was as if all the strands of my life had come together. And I've never forgotten that moment. And I've seen it again and again and again over the years. So you're absolutely right, Jamie. Nothing is ever lost in God's economy.
For sure. Yeah, what I love about what you're calling their commissioners is I think we've all had that moment where you look at your desk. For you, is the desk and the papers and the deals, and you just say, there's got to be something bigger than this, greater than this, more meaningful than this. And you know what? I think about what profit a man to gain the whole world, right? And then of course to hear Commissioner Jolene, to hear you say it was that growing into the calling. I think we all want an Isaiah experience where he says, "Who shall I send?" The clouds roll back and the trumpets blare. But I think it's this for most of us, it's just this burning in the bones that we feel the silent, strong calling on our life to that. So, all right, well, thank you, commissioners. Go ahead.
I've got to say one other thing on that, Matt. You're absolutely right. What we've just described is so countercultural. What we have just described is precisely the opposite of what the world as a whole will say today to people that are trying to struggle with what they're going to do with their lives. The world today will suggest you are in charge of yourself. You're to make yourself, create yourself, sustain yourself, publicize yourself. You're in charge. You are the center. The Christian life, following Christ, says you take yourself off the throne. You are abandoning all of that. The freedom that comes from that. You're no longer carrying that enormous burden that most people go through life dealing with. It's countercultural because it's counterintuitive.
For sure.
But it's very, very real.
Yeah, yes, sir. I mean, and for a culture that says to matter, you have to achieve, succeed, like that. You just said it, Commissioner. I mean, to follow Jesus, and when he calls us to surrender all of that, man. All right. Here's the question that's on everybody's mind, and it's a huge question. It's got 1,000 answers, but everybody wants to know, what's it like being the national leaders of the Salvation Army? Do that in one word. No, I'm just kidding.
My one word would be humbling.
Okay. What's it like? What's it like?
It's humbling to me because you see the work that the Army does all around the world. I mean, we're in every zip code in the United States. And my husband and I cannot go anywhere when we're in uniform. We cannot go anywhere without somebody pulling us aside and thanking us for something that has happened in one of these local communities because of the Salvation Army.
Yeah, we were on a plane recently. And of course, we were back in the economy seats. And a gentleman comes back from first class. And he walks all the way back during the course of the flight, and he sticks out his hand and he said, "You folks saved my son's life." And he was referring to what had happened at an ARC. So my wife is right. It is humbling because we're conscious of what God is doing in every part of the Salvation Army world. And it's not just limited to the shores of the United States. We have a chance to see what the Salvation Army is doing internationally, to support what the Salvation Army is doing internationally. So when people say thank you, which they very often do in the roles that we play, our first response is to say, well, We do it because of what the Lord has called us to do. And we always bring it back to Him. So it's exciting. It's fun. It's exhilarating. It's exhausting. But boy, we wouldn't do anything else. We love it.
Yeah, I think for the listeners out there, I would tell how much the commissioners travel. They are all over the United States all the time. You've probably seen them at your local core. I don't know how they do it, but they walk in on a Sunday morning, I'm sure. So
yeah, that's right. That's true.
So I know a lot of times it's easy for us to kind of get focused on, what's happening in our context, or thinking that, all the things that are happening here in my experience of the Salvation Army is what it looks like everywhere. We kind of get a little myopic on that sometimes. And I think it's our human nature to sometimes focus on challenges rather than to kind of see all, like, what are all the great things. So can you share a little bit? You get to see it all on both sides, right? But a lot of the things that you get to experience are some really incredible things that the Salvation Army is doing, not just around the nation, but around the world. So can you share a little bit about some of the strengths that you've seen, or really some of the kind of life-changing work that you see that the Salvation Army is doing across the country?
Sure, glad to. I think there are two that really come to mind for me. The first is our mission. Our mission is designed to constantly keep asking ourselves, are we doing what the Lord wants us to do? Unlike many corporate missions, which say we will do X and we will do X better than anyone else, the Salvation Army's mission statement is intentionally designed to create a tension. Our mission statement says we're going to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ and meet human needs in His name without discrimination. There are two things there that are linked with that and. So Salvationists are always asking themselves, all right, have I done enough proclamation of the gospel today? And at the same time, today, have I done enough to meet human needs? We're constantly seeking to balance them. And that means that it's never a settled issue, that the Lord is constantly working in us and through us. He's constantly educating us. We're constantly learning. I think that's an enormous strength, because we're always challenging ourselves to do better in both senses. We want to restore people's lives. We want to give them a better opportunity to overcome their addictions, or we want to give a child a better opportunity to grow and to thrive. But at the same time, we never want to forget the whole person. We want the gospel to be proclaimed. We want Jesus Christ to be lifted up. That questioning, that constant self-examination is a great strength. The other strength that really comes to my mind is the fact that following that mission, the Army has developed in this country a relationship with the public that gives it enormous credibility. No one who's wearing a Salvation Army uniform has to worry about their own strengths or weaknesses when they walk into a room filled with community leaders. I have seen on so many occasions situations in which I was totally unprepared, totally incapable of contributing intelligently to a conversation. Yet when I came in my Salvation Army uniform, there was instant credibility, because the Army has proven itself as an organization, as a part of the church that cares about people. And that is a huge strength today when so many people distrust all kinds of institutions. We have a tremendous opportunity that many do not have.
That's great, Commissioner. Because you're right, there is a mistrust of institutions, of organizations, and all that. Commissioner Jolene, what are some of the strengths that you see, ma'am?
I was just going to say that I think one of our biggest strengths is our flexibility. When I see how we meet the needs in the community, we are not copycat at all. And just how quickly we can respond. I mean, I looked during COVID and how quickly the Army responded to the needs. We moved into hotels and it was amazing the opportunities that were given to the Salvation Army because of our flexibility, and how our Salvationists just stepped into the role.
Oh, yeah.
It was amazing.
We're clearing out thrift stores to turn them into shelters, having municipalities say, we have these empty hotels. Can you come and run something that'll get the homeless off the street? These are enormous strengths, and they're all founded upon a legacy of people who have faithfully gone about the work that God called them to do. And our prayer every day, therefore, is, Lord, make us faithful today as those who have gone before, because we're going to have to pass this down to the next generation. And we want to leave as strong a legacy as possible.
That's great. Thank you, commissioners, for that. Yes. I mean, whether you go to a Salvation Army in Montana or a Salvation Army in Alabama, that trust is there in the Army. But like Commissioner Jolene said, the flexibility, you would see the community needs are different in Montana and Alabama, but being met differently, but with still the same level of trust that's there. So, all right, commissioners, have there been any surprises since you've become national leaders? Has there been anything that you were like, oh, wow?
Yeah, it's have to say, oh boy, those Satterleys.
Yeah, that's been a lovely surprise to work with you too.
I can explain.
Yeah. Listen, I think that's most people's reaction when, those Satterleys.
I think one of the biggest surprises for me is just how busy national headquarters is. I had no idea. And I think the reason is because truly we are the grease that keeps the Army organized and running. And I had no idea how many groups are represented here. Literally throughout the nation, there are so many committees and so many commissions that come to our building so that the whole Army world has a say what happens in our policies and our procedures. And I just find that incredibly exciting. I think the last I heard, we had over 50.
We have 54 groups. Yeah, that report through the Commissioners Conference. And, just to make that all work and the way that it's done so seamlessly was a delightful surprise.
Yep, delightful. And then also our participation on Capitol Hill. My husband and I are there quite often, and I just find it so exciting that we can bring both sides of the aisle together and pray individually for them, and talk about issues and how they can help us in our ministry and our mission. I just have found that incredibly exciting.
Yeah, I think on the Hill, you're surprised by something that you should know instinctively. Our representatives and senators and members of the administration are just people.
Mm-hmm.
They're people who want to do their best, who are seeking to do what they think is right, and who are seeking to have a positive impact. And it's just a tremendous opportunity to go up there and to pray with people, to write them little notes when they're encountering difficult moments, to celebrate with them when they have victories. It's been a tremendous enriching of our own ministry to have that opportunity.
That's awesome. Yeah, the commissioners, I think just earlier this week, were on the Hill, weren't you? Had met 9 different Congress representatives in that time.
Yeah, we were up there recently, met with 9 members of the House this week. We've testified before Congress in December.
I don't know if that was a joke. I didn't know.
No, that's true. No, very true. Very true.
What did you do, sir, that you had to testify to?
Testify, yeah. I testified to the House Committee on Veterans Affairs, to the Subcommittee on Economic Opportunity, to describe what the Salvation Army feels the federal government can do better to serve veterans. That was a great opportunity. No, it was not that there was an investigation being conducted.
Commissioner Hodder,
good
you are,
testify.
we are holding you in contempt. And then you just were like, no, you don't even know.
I can see where your mind's going here, Matt.
I got courtroom drama.
But that's a tremendous opportunity.
Sure. And for more, also, as Commissioner Jolene was talking about Commissioners Conference, just a reminder to our listeners, if you go back a few episodes of the podcast, we did an in-depth dive on how the Commissioners Conference system works. So check out that, and that's what commissioners are talking about as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's been one of the surprises for me, is learning just exactly how policy is made for the Salvation Army in the United States. And certainly that Commissioners Conference process is quite fascinating. Go back and check that out.
Yeah, it is a fascinating process, and it's a tremendous strength right now. It's a tremendous strength right now because the Army, as a part of the church, is organized in a hierarchical fashion. And in an atmosphere when people are going 1,000 different directions, that gives us a cohesion organizationally that serves us very, very well.
So we do have, since the battle line is kind of under the peer umbrella, we have quite a few young adults and youth leaders who are part of this podcast audience. And so thinking back over your life as a Salvation Army officer, and even prior to that, when you're thinking about who you were when you launched out into the world, like if you could go back and tell your young adult self one thing, what would you say?
I think for me, it's that there will be some difficult times and there will be some very scary times in your life. But if you give your entire life over to Christ, it's going to be okay. And you're going to be on an amazing adventure, an adventure that you would never have chosen for yourself, but you will be blessed beyond measure if you just continue to keep saying yes to God.
Yes. I think for me, it would be similar. Life, when I was 18, struck me as being something of a sprint, that I had to achieve certain things by a certain point. But I think over the years, I've come to understand that it's a marathon. And if you approach life with the long game in mind, where do I want to find myself? And not so much in terms of career, but in terms of my relationship with the Lord. What is going to be my contribution to His kingdom? You acquire a depth of wisdom that Scripture calls us to, that when you're 18 years of age, you're not so thinking about. You're thinking about quick return, about something that can be done within the next 10 years, because after all, doesn't everybody make their impact by the time that they're 30? It's simply not true. So I think play the long game, trust in the Lord. Those are the things I would tell myself if I were 18 right now.
That's great, Commissioner. Great. Thank you so much for that. All right. So again, as Major Jamie said, there are youth, there are millennial Salvationists, Gen Z Salvationists, some youth leaders out there. I imagine there's a bunch of Corps officers listening today because they wanted to hear their national leaders. So what would be your words, your message? You are the commissioner of the United States. So what would be your orders, both of you, national leaders, that you want to say to your young people, to your young Salvationists in the 4 U.S. territories?
Do the mission. There are 1,000 different causes. They will all be wrapped up in the mission. So keep your focus, keep the main thing, do the mission, and all of the other issues and all of the other concerns that you could give yourself to, you'll find you're able to address far more effectively than if you had focused on them as the initial goal.
And I would say we need you on the battlefield more than ever. Put on your armor. Spend time with the Lord, coffee and Jesus. Spend time with the Lord.
Yep.
And take direction from Him and Him only.
That's good. I think, Commissioner, you just said in a Salvation Army context, you just put a Salvation Army version of Scripture with "Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and everything else will be added unto you." You just did that Salvation Army NIV version.
Yeah. That's right. Absolutely.
All right. So at the end of every episode, we ask this question of our special guests and of our hosts. So we're going to ask you today, commissioners, what is giving you joy?
The most precious jewels that I will ever have around my neck are the arms of my grandchildren. And they bring me great joy, and they are a great gift from God.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to disagree with that. But let me add to it.
What gives you joy, Commissioner, more than your grandchildren?
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Oh, boy. Well, I guess that I've got another day to do it. I've got another day to praise the Lord, another day to be thankful, and another day to see Him work. That gives me a lot of joy.
That's awesome. Thank you, Commissioners. Major Jamie, how about you? What's giving you joy today?
So a thing that I am trying to do, it's January. Everybody's talking about resolutions, although it's mid-January now. So most people, I shouldn't say most people, a lot of people, probably forgotten. But one of the things that I've kind of challenged myself this year is to keep up with a gratitude journal.
Good.
And so I my sister-in-law did one last year, and she sent me the link. So it comes already, it's three things you're thankful for every day. And so each night before I go to bed, I do my devotions, and then I fill out those 3 things that I'm thankful for. And some days, I'll be honest, some days are easier than others, right? Some days I really have to think, but it causes me to refocus and to take a look at, like, what is God really doing in my life? What are the bright spots in each day? Yes, there are challenges, but there are also blessings and things that God is working in my life. And so I've enjoyed that process. And so it is bringing me joy right now.
Yeah.
Good.
I steal her journal to write my name in there every day. Elizabeth, what's giving you joy?
This morning, I got to chat with the most fabulous Bethany of NCRD, and she is just so rad and cool. So it felt me up.
I agree with you 100% on that, Elizabeth. She is rad and cool. And I'm always saying that. She is rad and cool. Yeah, and she's one of those people who I'll stand up to speak, and she'll say, "Now, Commissioner, say this and don't say this." So she gives me tremendous direction as to how I should function as national. I couldn't do it without her.
Well, when I'm on video, I have given her permission to clip any gray hairs that might be standing straight up. Now, every time I give her that permission, she has not yet taken me up on it, but she's awesome.
Yeah, that's one of the great things. We're spinning out into multiple joys, but it's one of the great things about national headquarters is the people that we get to work with and the passionate, they're passionate about what they do. And we have a great team. Listen, we do lots of laughter around the lunch table here at NHQ. So,
and let me just say thank you to you folks. The Battle Line podcast is a tremendous addition to what National Headquarters does. And the way the 3 of you bring such excitement and enthusiasm to what the Army is doing, to the gospel and its application to your listeners, it's just wonderful. And I'm very grateful to you.
Thank you so much, Commissioners. Commissioners, before we let you go, is there anything else you want to say to your people out there, to the American people?
To our youth people and to our Salvationists and to our youth workers, we want you to know that we love you and we are here for you and we are behind you 100%. Just go out and do the mission and God will bless you.
And ditto.
And to the American public, if you're listening, we want to thank you for your support.
Amen.
And you are the Army behind the Army, and we love you too.
Yes, indeed.
All right. If you want to see the commissioners again, just turn to C-SPAN. They will be testifying before Congress.
I would say, I have no recollection of that, Senator.
I refuse to answer on the. I used that one a lot growing up. So. That's going to end this episode of the Battle Line Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the Battle Line wherever you listen to podcasts, and be sure to check out the Peer website at peermag.org and follow Peer on the socials at peer.magazine. Again, commissioners, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for this time. Until next time, this has been the Battle Line Podcast. Bye.
See ya.